Okay, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming today. My name is Dan Lupo. I am a Long Island-based musician and music educator. Currently, am residing in Nashville, Tennessee, but I was born and raised on Long Island. Spent pretty much my entire life there. Um, my father was a chiropractor, but he was also a music hobbyist, especially in his younger days. He played the piano a little bit. He taught himself how to play the violin. And when I was around 9 years old, he showed me how to play Feuerlis on the piano, the song that I just played. I don't know if everybody could hear it. The song that I just played, Feuerlis by Beethoven, he taught me how to play it. And ever since then, I pretty much was just fell in love with music. I taught myself how to play the guitar, the bass, the drums, of course, the piano. I'm primarily self-taught. I am. I did take a couple of semesters in a local community college on Long Island, Nassau Community College. But other than that, I've been self-taught my whole life. The thing I would say at this point in my career that probably I'm the most proud of is a video tutorial. It's an online-based video tutorial program. It's called 5 Minute Mozart. And it's basically designed to help beginning music students easily and efficiently understand the basics of music theory, along with my website and the YouTube. At this point, the YouTube has, last time I checked, it was about just under 21,000 subscribers, almost 3 million total views. It's seen in every country in the world, and it's currently being used as an educational resource for students really all across the globe. So if anybody is interested, it's completely free. 5minutemozart.com is where you can find that to help with beginning music theory. So we're here today to talk about holiday music, what the title of the program calls the most wonderful songs of the year. I'm going to get into the backstory of a lot of these songs. I'm gonna discuss a lot of them. I'm gonna play some piano. We'll play some videos as well. I do ask that everybody keeps their microphone on mute. It just makes the sound better for everybody else involved if there's not too much background noise going on. The program should last around 45 to 50 minutes, where then I will be open to talking with anybody if anybody has questions or wants to discuss anything that I said or just has something that they'd like to say. I would be more than happy to stay and chat, but for the 45 to 50 minutes during the program, please keep your mics muted. Now, one of the questions that's asked of me the most after I do this program is, what is my favorite holiday music song? And I would say this, because I've thought about it a lot, and actually I'm a big Christmas holiday fan. Actually, my wife and I decided to get married on the 21st of December for, among other reasons, but also so that we could have a Christmas-themed wedding, which was very nice. But probably my favorite holiday music would be from the soundtrack of the Peanuts Charlie Brown Christmas special. The composer of that, Vince Guaraldi. I'm pretty sure it's very much debated how you exactly say his last name. Some people say Guaraldi. That's what I say. Other people say Gravaldi. If anybody knows for sure, maybe by the end of this program you can correct me. But for now, I'm going to say Guaraldi. He's a jazz pianist, and he's most renowned, obviously, for creating the Peanuts soundtrack, but he has a vast library of music that he's recorded. He's not just Peanuts music. But for me, the music that he wrote for the Charlie Brown special is in of itself a character. He's able to paint this picture with the music, and maybe it's because, in my mind, it's so closely associated with the Charlie Brown cartoons. But whenever I hear his music, and not just the cartoon music that he's made, but any recordings that he's ever done, he just has this way of playing that's so, it just, like I said, it just paints such a clear picture. So I'd like to start the program by playing a few of his pieces that I enjoy from the Charlie Brown Christmas special. And so, without further ado, this is Holiday Favorites, the most wonderful songs of the year. You know, it's easy to associate the season of giving with the songs that made the holidays what they are today, whether you're ready for it or not. In the days following Halloween, the radio airwaves are almost immediately filled with songs of Yuletide. In many cases, your local CVS may even start putting out boxes of Christmas lights as early as July. However, the story of how some of your favorite holiday songs came to be is not always what you might expect. For example, did you know that Let It Snow was written in Hollywood, California during one of the hottest days of the year? In July of 1945, Jewish-born lyricist Sammy Cahn and Broadway singer Jewel Stein were looking for a way to evade the oppressive summer's sun. Sam Cahn had suggested that they both go down to the beach to cool off, but Stein petitioned something different. "Why don't we stay here and write a winter song?" he said. So, sitting in front of his typewriter with beads of sweat trickling down his face, Kahn wrote the now famous opening lines, "Oh, the weather outside is frightful, but the fire is so delightful, and since we've no place to go, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow." Interestingly, though now widely accepted as a holiday staple, the song makes no mention of Christmas or Hanukkah or any other winter holiday for that matter. Actually, with lyrics like "The lights are turned way down low" and "When we finally kiss goodnight," it's easy to see that it was initially intended to be a sort of winter-themed love song. Surprisingly, the summer of 1945 proved to be a lucrative period for writing holiday classics. According to the youngest son of American musician Mel Torme, his father wrote the quintessential holiday classic, The Christmas Song, also dubbed Chestnuts Roasting on an Open Fire, during an oppressive summer's day of that same year. As the story goes, one blisteringly hot afternoon, Torme headed off to the home of his songwriting partner Robert Wells so that the two could arrange music for a musical movie that they were both commissioned to work on. But before they began, Torme noticed a spiral notepad on the mounter by the piano with 4 lines jotted down in pencil. "Chestnuts roasting on an open fire, Jack Frost nipping at your nose, Yuletide carols being sung by a choir, and folks dressed up like Eskimos." He jokingly questioned his partner Wells about the oddity of writing winter sentiments during the middle of the summer, not realizing that his short verse would eventually become song lyrics sung by millions. Wells's response was, quote, "I thought that if I could just write down a few lines of wintry verse, I can get a physiological edge over the heat." The two instantly teamed up to finish the piece, and a mere 45 minutes later, the lyrics to the Christmas song were complete. Shortly after, Torme arranged the music, and a year after that, Nat King Cole put together his own arrangement to be recorded with his band. 1 year earlier, in 1944, at the beginning of the holiday season, a 31-year-old grade school teacher from Smithtown, New York, named Donald Yetter Gardner, was working with a group of second graders to help them compose an original Christmas song. His assignment to the class was to complete the following sentence: "All I want for Christmas is..." One by one, each of the students proclaimed their deepest desire to be fulfilled by Santa, and as he listened to their list of wishes, he couldn't help but smile to himself, not because of what they were asking for, but more in the way that they were speaking. You see, many of the children were missing 1 or 2 of their front teeth, and Gardner was charmed by their requests, hindered by toothless lisping. At home that night, in only 30 minutes, he penned the lyrics to a song which continued to give him royalties until his death in 2004. All I Want for Christmas Is My 2 Front Teeth was recorded by Spike Jones and his City Slickers in 1948. Gardner would later admit the level of awe he felt at his sudden success, stating, quote, "I was amazed at the way that silly little song was picked up by the whole country." But not every holiday classic has such an innocent background. In 1934, 33-year-old songwriter Richard Smith was being treated for a terminal disease at the West Mountain Sanitarium in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Never-ending coughing fits caused by tuberculosis left him weak and constantly gasping for air. He was barely able to sit up in his bed, let alone write music or lyrics. After years of fighting a losing battle, Smith accepted his fate and essentially was waiting to die. But one cold afternoon, while lying in his bed, dreaming of days gone by, he heard a familiar noise coming from outside. Fighting through the pain, he somehow managed to stand up and stumble his way over to the window. Looking outside, he found that the source of the noise was a small group of children playing in the snow. For over 1 hour, he watched them dance, organize a snowball fight, and even build a snowman which they talked to as if it was real. Later that day, As the sun went down and the children retreated back to their homes, with an excitement he had not felt in a long time, Smith jotted down some of his thoughts. Recalling memories from his childhood and basking in the youthful innocence he observed on that cold winter's day, he wrote a poem that would eventually become the lyrics for a holiday classic. Sleigh bells ring. Are you listening? In the lane, snow is glistening. A beautiful sight. I'm happy tonight, walking in a winter wonderland. Although he did live long enough to hear a recorded version of Winter Wonderland, the befallen songwriter succumbed to his illness less than a year later. He would never know the extent of how popular his tune would eventually become. But long before the halls were decked and Rudolph's nose glowed red, and Mariah Carey's All I Want for You brought in a staggering $70 million in royalties to date, a song which she co-wrote in a mere 15 minutes. The world sang along to a different kind of melody, songs with much deeper spiritual meaning. Not many people know that the road which brought caroling to where it is today was somewhat treacherous. The Christmas Carol, as we currently know it, dates back thousands of years, and it actually has its roots in pagan worship. Carols were first performed in Europe during the winter solstice, when people would sing and dance around stone enclosures to celebrate the sun and the imminent return of longer and warmer days. Actually, the famous earthwork known as Stonehenge in England is believed to have originally been used for such an occasion. By the 1st century of the Common Era, the Christian Church began to adopt some of these same rituals and festivities. However, they gave them more of a religious structure, like removing the birth of the sun and replacing it with the birth of Christ. The Church also swapped out the sun worship songs and gave its clergy Christian ones to sing in its place. In the year 129, decreed by a Roman bishop, the first song that was designated to be sung during the celebration of what would later come to be known as Christmas was a song called the Angel's Hymn. Unfortunately, though, not much is known about the structure and melody of this tune, as very little information on it has survived throughout the years. But what we do know, from limited surviving text, is that it was meant to be sung solemnly, which makes sense, seeing how the ancient singing style of plain song dominated the church repertoire during those days. Now, for those who may not know, plain song is a style of singing in which unaccompanied voices sing in unison and usually in a minor key. This was the defining characteristic of most church standards, and for this reason, Christmas carols were not as widely beloved as they are today. Not only were they all written and sung in Latin, which was a language that most common people could not understand, but they were often very melancholic as well. Eventually, because of its previous association with pre-Christian pagan rituals, for the next couple hundred years, caroling was banned altogether by the church. But as we now know, they could not keep carols outlawed forever. By the start of the 13th century, at the dawn of what we now call the Renaissance, the church's overbearing attitude towards singing and celebrating began to dissuade people from religious institutions altogether. In Italy, recognizing a need for revisioning, a man by the name of Francis of Assisi started a musical revolution, feeling that the church was putting too much emphasis on the symbol of the cross and not enough on the incarnation, or the birth of God as man. He attempted to reignite enthusiasm, specifically for the birth of Christ, by parodying popular folk dances with sacred lyrics. He also made sure that these new carols were written not in Latin, but in a language that could be more easily understood by a wider audience. Because of this, his new melodies quickly spread all across Europe, and by the 16th century, they were an established part of the Christmas celebration. However, when the Puritans came to power in England in the mid-1600s, the practice of caroling was once again abolished, as it was seen to be too closely connected once again to ancient pagan customs. Actually, the Puritans were completely against the celebration of Christmas altogether. but the band was unpopular with many churchgoers as people still sung the songs in secret. Christmas eventually survived the Puritan regime, and in, and in the 19th century Victorian era, the tradition of caroling was brought back to life with enthusiasm. Two men named William Sandys and David Gilbert traveled across the villages of England, collecting carols that had been stored in quiet secrecy and arranging them into an anthology. New services based on these carols were created within the church, and the custom of singing carols once again became popular. Today, Christmas carols are every bit a part of the festivities as candy canes and mistletoe. Let's take a look at the origin of some popular Christmas carols. In 1818, the assistant priest of the Church of St. Nicholas in Oberndorf, Austria, was a 25-year-old man by the name of Joseph Mohr. Now, part of Mohr's responsibilities as assistant priest included organizing and arranging the music for the Christmas Eve Mass, one of the most important services of the year. One night, as he cleaned and readied the altar and surrounding area, he realized that the church's organ would not play. After nearly taking the entire instrument apart, looking for any indication on how the issue might be resolved, he was left hopeless. A suspicion still debated today, actually, was that mice may have chewed their way through the internal workings of the organ. The Mass, he thought, would have to go on without music. But just as his hope for a solution was waning, he remembered a poem that he had written a couple of years earlier, which was inspired by a walk he had on a silent, wintry night. The poem, which he had titled Stille Nacht, Heilige Nacht, was made up of 6 plain stanzas. These verses, he thought, might work well as lyrics to an original Christmas carol. However, it had no music, nor any semblance of a melody. But he was determined to not let the Christmas Eve service fall silent, so he ventured out into the snow and made his way to the home of 31-year-old schoolteacher and musician Franz Gruber. After explaining his dilemma, Mohr asked if Gruber can write an arrangement to his poem that could specifically be played on just a guitar. Remember, at this point, the organ is not working. He also wanted to make sure that the melody would be easy enough for a small choir to learn quickly. Franz accepted the challenge and hours later presented Mohr with an arrangement for guitar and a 2-part vocal melody. Delighted by this new arrangement, Mohr and Gruber taught the simple melody to a small choir mere hours before the start of the Mass. And that night, standing in front of the congregation, the group performed the very first rendition of Silent Night. The carol quickly grew in its popularity in the following years. In 1834, King Frederick William IV of Prussia ordered it to be sung by his cathedral choir every single Christmas Eve. It eventually made its way across the pond to America, where Episcopal priest John Freeman Young translated it into English. It's since been translated into hundreds of different languages and continues to be a staple in the Christmas repertoire. Later in the 19th century, a man's life took an unexpected turn. Placide Cappeau was the son of a cooper, which essentially is a barrel maker for the production and storage of wine. As a child, he was destined to follow his father in the family business. However, an accident changed his life forever. While out playing with a friend at the age of 8, the two were handling a gun, and Cappeau was shot in the hand. His hand needed to be amputated. So he eventually turned to academics by focusing his life on becoming a lawyer and a poet. As a non-religious man, he was shocked many years later when a parish priest in the small French village where he lived asked him to write a poem for the village's Christmas Eve Mass. Now, not one to turn down a financial opportunity, Cappeau accepted the challenge as well as the advanced commission and immediately went to work. One afternoon, while traveling to the city of Paris on a bumpy road in a dusty horse-drawn carriage, he did his best to imagine witnessing the birth of Jesus in Bethlehem. By the time he arrived at his destination, Cantique de Noël had been completed. But just like Silent Night, the poem needed to be set to music. Not musically inclined, he turned to his friend Adolphe Adam, a French composer and music critic who was best known at the time for writing operas and ballets. Now, even though, as a man of Jewish ancestry, the poem represented a holiday which Adam did not celebrate, he was still able to create a stunningly beautiful original score to accompany Cappeau's words. 3 weeks later, O Holy Night was received with open arms. But when church leaders learned that Cappeau was a socialist who had walked away from the church and Adam was a Jew, the song, which was once almost uniformly beloved, was suddenly completely banned from being performed. Fortunately, though, it was saved from obscurity as the people of France continued to sing it. But how did it make its way to America? John Sullivan Dwight was a Unitarian minister and abolitionist during the Civil War who was also known for being America's first influential music critic. About a decade after Cantique de Noël, or O Holy Night, was first composed, Dwight fell in love with the band French Carol, specifically 3 lines in the 3rd verse. Chains shall he break, for the slave is our brother, and in his name all oppression shall cease. He brought the song halfway around the world to America, where it quickly grew in favor, especially in the North. Since then, O Holy Night's legacy has continued on. One famous story tells us how on Christmas Eve in 1871, in the middle of fighting the Franco-Prussian War, a French soldier suddenly jumped out from the trenches. Standing unarmed in the open battlefield, he began belting the opening lines of Cantique de Noël. Soon after he completed all 3 verses, a German soldier unveiled himself from his hiding place and answered with a few lines from a popular hymn by Martin Luther. Now, legend has it that fighting stopped for the next 24 hours as each side observed a temporary peace in honor of the Christmas holiday. Though not confirmed to indeed be true, this story is often credited to the French Church's willingness to re-embrace the carol. These days, O Holy Night is sung in nearly every corner of the world. jaunty, upbeat, and catchy. The perfect ingredients for the world's most performed holiday classic. However, the unofficial anthem of the holiday season has a history that not everyone who sings it might approve of. Born in the year 1822, James Pierpont was the second son of a Unitarian minister, poet, and fervent abolitionist in Medford, Massachusetts. As a child, Pierpont had somewhat of a rebellious spirit and adventurous nature. By just the age of 14, he had already run off from a boarding school and joined the crew of a whaling boat company. He served as a seaman on the vessel for just over half a decade until the age of 21. Years later, in 1849, when the gold rush struck California, he abandoned his wife and children to prospect for gold and chase down his riches in the West. Shortly after returning east, a number of years later, no richer than when he departed, he left his family behind once again to travel to Savannah, Georgia, to become the organist at a Unitarian church where his brother was the pastor. It was here where he wrote his biggest hit, Jingle Bells. However, this was not the song's original title. When it was first published in 1857 by a music publishing house in Boston, it was released under the title One Horse Open Sleigh. And though today it is synonymous with Santa hats and colorful Christmas lights, it was never intended to be a Christmas song at all. Rather, it was originally a drinking song, which, among many other things, spoke about the 19th century dating rituals of teenagers in America. Lesser-known verses describe drag racing in the snow, a crash involving a lean and lank horse, and even flirting with women while you're still young. Quote, "Now the ground is white. Go it while you're young. Take the girls tonight and sing this sleighing song." Ah, Christmas. Risque as it was for its time, it was eventually performed during a Thanksgiving celebration by the choir at his brother's church in Savannah. Actually, for years, it was considered to be a Thanksgiving song. People eventually started singing it on Christmas as well, and before long, its association with the latter holiday was cemented in place. James Pierpont would eventually go on to fight for the Confederacy during the Civil War as a private for the 1st Georgia Cavalry. He even wrote a number of songs for the Confederates, but stopped writing them altogether at the conclusion of the war. Now, Pierpont was destitute at the time of his death, as Jingle Bells never made him a lot of money. However, his older sister Juliet married into the wealthy Morgan family. Their oldest son, John Pierpont Morgan, James Pierpont's nephew, went on to become one of the most powerful financiers in history, J.P. Morgan. On December 16, 1965, Jingle Bells made history by being the first song ever broadcast from space. 2 astronauts aboard Gemini 6 reported to Mission Control with information on a potentially threatening unidentified object entering their trajectory just south of the North Pole. The tense report was suddenly interrupted by a rendition of Jingle Bells performed with a harmonica and a handful of small sleigh bells that the crew had snuck on board.
Roger, Houston and Gemini 7, this is Gemini 6. We have an object, looks like a satellite, going from north to south, up in a polar orbit. He's in a very low trajectory, traveling from north to south. Has a very high fineness ratio. Looks like it might even be a bonus thing. Very low, looks like maybe going 300 pretty soon. Stand by one. Looks like he's trying to signal something. We got him too, 6. That was live, 7, not tape.
You're too much, 6.
Despite its somewhat scandalous history, Jingle Bells has still somehow managed to find a way to slay its way into the hearts of nearly everyone on Earth. Every year when the madness of the holidays starts to dim, When the lights on the tree are unplugged and the flames of the menorah have been extinguished, family and friends of all races and backgrounds get together one more time to celebrate the start of a new beginning. It's a time when many people resolve to try to better themselves in the days and months ahead, as well as a time to reflect on past months. For more than 200 years, the anthem, which has been used to usher society into the dawn of a new year, has been none other than the popular Scottish folk song, Auld Lang Syne.
To my big brother George, the richest man in town. That's a Christmas present from a very dear friend of mine.
Look, Daddy, teacher says every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings.
That's right. That's right. Attaboy, Clarence.
But the story of how New Year's theme song came to be is somewhat murky and has continued to baffle researchers since it was first published in the year 1796. Robert Burns was a Scottish-born poet and lyricist. With nicknames like the National Bard and the Bard of Ayrshire, he has since come to be known as the William Shakespeare of Scotland. In fact, every year on January 25th, the anniversary of his birth, the people of Scotland celebrate his life and legacy with a special dinner in his honor known as Burns's Dinner or Burns's Night. Robert Burns is also the name most often credited with the writing of Auld Lang Syne. Now, it is true that he first wrote down the words to the poem in the late 1700s. However, Burns himself never claimed to be the true author of the work. Actually, when he sent the poem to his friend, James Johnson, who was assembling a book of old Scottish songs titled The Scots Musical Museum, Burns indicated to him that it was actually an ancient song. Now, many people believe that Auld Lang Syne has survived the years by being orally passed down from generation to generation. But how exactly did Auld Lang Syne make its way onto the lips of people celebrating New Year's all across the globe? The song's current popularity has Canadian-born band leader Guy Lombardo to thank. In 1929, while performing during a New Year's Eve radio broadcast at the Roosevelt Hotel in New York City, his band, the Royal Canadians, played Auld Lang Syne as a sort of musical transition just after midnight. For the next 50 years, Guy Lombardo and the Royal Canadians played Auld Lang Syne to ring in the new year. It even earned him the nickname Mr. New Year's Eve. Listening to the radio broadcast and then eventually watching it on television became a holiday ritual for people all across America, and so did singing along to Auld Lang Syne. Even when Dick Clark's New Year's Rockin' Eve kicked Guy Lombardo's big band style to the curb, the tradition of singing the popular Scottish folk song stuck and eventually spread. Now, regardless of who actually wrote the words or why we sing it on New Year's, the one question on everyone's mind when December turns to January is, what exactly does Auld Lang Syne even mean? There are a number of different translations which have been used for the meaning of Auld Lang Syne, some of which include days gone by, for old time's sake, and even a long time ago. However, the most literal word-for-word translation is old, long since. This clearly doesn't necessarily form a coherent statement in the English language. Regardless, Auld Lang Syne is believed to be about old friends, sharing a drink, talking about adventures long since past, and simply remembering the good times. Meg Ryan was indeed correct in her interpretation at the end of When Harry Met Sally.
I'm sorry, Harry. I know it's New Year's Eve. I know you're feeling lonely, but you just can't show up here, tell me you love me, and expect that to make everything all right. It doesn't work this way.
Well, how does it work?
I don't know, but not this way.
How about this way? I love that you get cold when it's 71 degrees out. I love that it takes you an hour and a half to order a sandwich. I love that you get a little crinkle above your nose when you're looking at me like I'm nuts. I love that after I spend a day with you, I can still smell your perfume on my clothes. And I love that you are the last person I want to talk to before I go to sleep at night. And it's not because I'm lonely, and it's not because it's New Year's Eve. I came here tonight because when you realize you want to spend the rest of your life with somebody, you want the rest of your life to start as soon as possible.
You see? That is just like you, Harry. You say things like that and you make it impossible for me to hate you. And I hate you, Harry. I really hate you.
What does this song mean? My whole life, I don't know what this song means. I mean, should old acquaintance be forgot? Does that mean that we should forget old acquaintances? It doesn't mean that if we happen to forget them, we should remember them, which is not possible because we already forgot them.
Well, maybe it just means that we should remember that we forgot them or something. Anyway, it's about old friends.
The first time we met, we hated each other.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming or for tuning in tonight. I hope you enjoyed my program. I'd just like to say before we wrap everything up that I offer programs on a variety of different classical music composers: Mozart, Beethoven, Bach, Chopin, Joplin. Also, this February, my wife and I will be doing a program on love songs. She's a singer as well. So if you enjoyed today's program, please put in a good word, and I would love to come back and do any one of the other programs for you. If anybody would like to stay and have a quick chat, I wouldn't mind answering any questions or just talking about anything you'd like to talk about. If not, I appreciate, again, everybody coming out tonight, and please have a happy and healthy New Year's. Thank you very much.